The message arrived between two emails I didn't care about, slipping quietly into my inbox like something small that somehow changed everything. I'm Adele Lane, a project coordinator living in Portland, Oregon. My days are usually predictable: budgets, deadlines, endless calls. But that afternoon, my phone buzzed and everything ordinary stopped. The first message was from my parents. "Please don't come. Your brother wants a drama-free wedding." I blinked, thinking it was a joke. Before I could type a reply, another message popped up. This one was from my brother. "Just send a gift." The screen light felt too bright. I kept staring at those words until they blurred. Not out of sadness, not even anger, just a dull, quiet disbelief. For months, I had been the one coordinating every part of his big day: transferring payments, confirming bookings, handling details no one else wanted to touch. I opened the shared folder labeled Wedding Budget and scrolled through each payment I'd signed off on: the venue deposit, catering, floral design, and music. Each line held my initials. I had thought I was building something for family. Turns out I was just financing a performance I wasn't invited to. I locked my phone and stared out the window. The city kept moving, but I couldn't. They wanted a drama-free wedding. Fine. They would get exactly that. If you've ever been told to stay quiet for someone else's peace, stay with me until the end. This story will make you rethink what family means when silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. That night, Portland rain wouldn't stop tapping on my window, a steady rhythm that made the apartment feel smaller than usual. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen spilling across my desk. The folder labeled Ethan and Claire Wedding Budget waited where I had left it. I clicked it open, and the numbers stared back at me, merciless and clean. $38,412. Every cent had come from my account. Each transfer, each confirmation email, each digital signature carried my name. For months, I had treated those payments like acts of love, not transactions. When Mom once told me, "You're the reason this family works," I believed her. She said it when I wired the deposit for the venue, when I booked the catering after Ethan forgot, when I spent an entire weekend comparing floral arrangements so Claire could just focus on her happiness. Back then, I thought it meant I mattered. Now I saw it meant I was useful. I scrolled through each invoice. The venue contract bore my signature, the catering receipt had my credit card, the florist's invoice showed my initials in neat blue ink. Even the band's agreement listed my email as the contact. I had paid for the celebration, yet I had been uninvited from the stage. The irony settled in, sharp and quiet. I started printing each contract one by one. The pages came out warm, curling slightly at the edges, landing in a growing pile beside my keyboard. I spread them across the table like evidence from a trial I hadn't realized I was part of. Every sheet was a reminder of trust, misplaced, of how easy it was to confuse generosity with obligation. At one point, I caught my reflection in the dark window. The rain distorted my face into something distant and tired. I remembered Ethan's voice last month, laughing over dinner, saying, "You're practically part of the wedding team." And I had smiled because I thought being part of something meant being seen. Now those words felt hollow, stripped of warmth. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the printer's final hum fade into silence. The contracts were all there, stacked neatly, lined up like the record of a mistake I had kept funding. I realized how invisible I had become. I wasn't the sister helping her brother start a new chapter. I was the accountant of their happiness, the quiet sponsor no one would thank. The clock on the wall showed just past midnight. I gathered the papers, arranging them carefully, as if organization could make the betrayal neater. For the first time, I noticed how heavy printed paper could feel. Each page carried a price, and together they formed the weight of what I had chosen to ignore for years. When the last sheet was in place, I closed the folder and shut the laptop. The rain outside eased into a drizzle, soft but relentless. I sat there for a long time, surrounded by receipts of a family that didn't see me. My parents had asked for a drama-free wedding, and my brother had agreed. As I looked at the contracts again, a calm settled in. Drama-free was exactly what they would have. 2 weeks before the wedding, I started my quiet plan. It was not revenge, not yet, but a deliberate pause, a way to make silence visible. My brother Ethan had made it clear that my presence was unwelcome. My parents had agreed for the sake of peace. So peace was exactly what I intended to give them, an immaculate stillness, one that would reach every corner of their perfect celebration. I began with the contracts. The first call went to the venue manager, a woman named Patricia, who had always spoken to me as if we were partners in an elegant conspiracy. I told her there would be a brief hold on the payment schedule. Just a minor administrative review, I said, keeping my tone professional. She hesitated and asked, "Should I call your mother to confirm?" I smiled at the question, though she could not see it. "Not yet," I replied softly. "I'll let you know when it's time." Next was the catering company. The manager, Alan, remembered every dish I had approved. When I told him to pause the final installment, he sounded puzzled. "Everything okay, Ms. Lane?" he asked. "Completely fine," I said. "Just aligning budgets." The phrase came out smooth, empty of emotion. That seemed to reassure him, which was the point. I didn't want alarm. I wanted control. The florist followed, then the live band, then the photographer. Each conversation unfolded the same way, me calm, courteous, efficient. I asked them all to pause, never to cancel. Cancellation would cause noise, and noise attracted attention. What I needed was quiet precision. By the end of that week, every major payment was frozen, every invoice redirected. I transferred the remaining balance from the shared account to a new private one, labeling it with the same precision I once used for their budgets: temporary holding, personal audit. It felt clinical, detached, yet strangely satisfying. I was not stealing. I was reclaiming what had been disguised as generosity. Each evening, I wrote notes in a small ledger listing every vendor and the date I had paused them. I added reminders and alerts that read, "No payment beyond today." The handwriting was neat, deliberate, a reflection of the calm I wanted to maintain. Every stroke of the pen steadied me, made the situation feel less like betrayal and more like accounting. My phone buzzed one night while I was working on the list. Ethan's name appeared on the screen. "Do you remember the final menu choices?" he texted. I looked at the message for a moment before replying, "You'll find out soon enough." It was not sarcasm, only a truth waiting to arrive. Afterward, I sat back and thought of Mom's voice telling me not to make things difficult. She used to say that love was measured by how much one could give without expecting acknowledgement. For years, I believed her. Now I understood that silence was not always love. Sometimes it was permission for others to forget you existed. As the days passed, I rehearsed each step like a performance no one would see. The wedding emails from Claire began filling my inbox, requests for last-minute details, color palettes, guest lists. I responded politely, attaching old files but withholding the new ones. She thanked me with exclamation marks. I replied with periods. The night before the payments were due, I reviewed everything one last time. Every contract was paused, every auto payment stopped. The event was fully dependent on my authorization, and I had removed it without a sound. I watched the cursor blink on the screen, an impatient heartbeat against the calm. When I finally closed the laptop, I felt something close to peace. Outside, Portland's nightlights reflected in the rain-soaked streets, shimmering like broken glass. I had not destroyed anything yet, but I had redrawn the lines. They wanted a wedding without me. I was simply ensuring that absence meant something. A week later, I met my best friend Marin at a cafe downtown. Marin had known me since college. She was the only person who understood the silence between my words. She looked up the moment I sat down. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice low, careful, as though the walls might be listening. There was no judgment in her tone, only concern. I stirred the sugar in my coffee until it dissolved and said, "They wanted peace. I'm giving them exactly that." Marin studied my face for a while before speaking again. "You're not doing this out of spite?" she asked. I shook my head. "No. I'm just done pretending that money can replace respect." She nodded slowly as if she had expected that answer, but still hoped I would take it back. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe was filled with the soft hum of machines and the faint sound of rain tapping against glass. Then she said, "Maybe don't react, Adele. Let your actions speak for you." Her words were calm, but her eyes betrayed worry. She had seen me break before in smaller ways over smaller disappointments. This was different. This was deliberate. "I'm not reacting," I told her. "I'm setting a boundary." Saying it aloud felt strange, like hearing my own voice for the first time after years of being muted. Marin reached across the table and touched my wrist gently. "Boundaries are fine," she said. "But sometimes they cut deeper than you think." I leaned back, watching the condensation form trails down the window. They used to say I was part of everything I murmured. Every family event, every emergency, every plan. But it was never about inclusion. It was about convenience. I made things work. That's all they saw. Marin listened without interrupting. She had always known when to be silent. "Families can love you and still use you," she said finally. "It's a hard truth to face." I nodded, taking a sip of coffee gone lukewarm. "This time I'm not paying for their comfort," I said. "Not emotionally, not financially." She looked at me with quiet admiration, though worry still lingered behind her calm expression. "You won't tell them in advance?" she asked. "No," I said. "No warnings. I've spent my whole life giving them chances to notice. They never did. They only see value when it benefits them. So they'll find out the way I found out, by surprise." Marin smiled faintly. "That's cold," she said, though, not unkindly. "It's precise." I replied. "It's fair." The server came to refill our cups, and we both fell silent until he left. The smell of roasted beans filled the air, grounding us back into the present. Marin rested her chin on her hand. "You ever wonder if they'll understand why?" she asked. "Understanding isn't required," I said. "Just consequence." We sat there for a while, the sound of traffic rising and fading outside. I thought about how peaceful it felt to be with someone who didn't demand explanations. Marin wasn't trying to change my mind. She was witnessing it. Before we left, she placed her hand over mine again. "Silence is sometimes the loudest protest," she said softly. I met her gaze and nodded, knowing she was right. There was no need to shout, no need to justify. The absence of my money, my effort, my presence that would speak for me. As we stepped out into the rain, she pulled her coat tighter, and I did the same. The cold felt sharper, cleaner. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their weight. 4 days before the wedding, I checked my bank app. The morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, striping the floor in pale lines. I wasn't expecting movement in any of my accounts, but the numbers caught my eye immediately. One of the sub-accounts had a new transaction, $2,000 transferred out, labeled neatly in the memo line for florist. The sender was my mother, Linda. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. It wasn't the amount that bothered me. It was the message written between the numbers, the quiet assumption that she still had access that she could take without asking, because it had always been that way. In my family, financial control had never required permission. It was masked as family contribution, as if generosity erased boundaries. I didn't call her. I didn't text or confront. Confrontation was noise, and I had promised myself silence. Instead, I opened the settings menu, selected Manage Access, and revoked every shared authorization linked to my mother's account. Then I changed the password, updated the recovery email, and added a 2-step verification she would never know existed. When the confirmation email arrived, I read it twice before closing the app. The sense of finality was strange, less like cutting ties, more like sealing a door that had been open too long. That afternoon, I sat at my desk and drafted a series of messages. The first went to the wedding vendors, a polite, firm notice confirming the suspension of all payments. Effective immediately, I wrote, "Please consider our previous agreements inactive until further confirmation from me." I used simple professional language, careful not to sound emotional. Then I copied the same message into a second email for the event company, handling the wedding coordination, adding one more line: remove all stored payment details associated with my account. The replies came in waves, automated acknowledgments first, then short confirmations from actual staff. Some sounded confused, others indifferent. It didn't matter. I wanted records, not explanations. By evening, the digital side of everything was clean. No saved cards, no linked invoices, no pending transactions. The financial threads that had connected me to the wedding were cut with quiet precision. Around 7, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Ethan. "Thank you for being understanding," he wrote. The words glowed on the screen like an afterthought, careless and detached. There was no mention of the money, no hint of awareness about the weight of what he was thanking me for. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then locked the phone without replying. Dinner that night was quiet. The city outside my window moved in its usual rhythm: cars passing, sirens, distant people laughing somewhere below. I ate without tasting anything, my thoughts circling around the idea of permission, how much I had given, how little they had noticed. Later, I pulled open the drawer beside my desk. The wedding invitation lay there, still pristine in its envelope, cream paper edged in gold. Together with their families, it said, as if the phrase itself could erase every fracture that led here. I traced my thumb over the embossed letters, feeling the texture of words that no longer included me. I placed the invitation flat on the desk and whispered to no one, "This is my RSVP." The words were soft, almost kind. There was no anger left, only a calm certainty. I had already answered, not through confrontation or withdrawal, but through the quiet act of reclaiming what was mine. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one. Somewhere I imagined my mother preparing flowers that would never be delivered, my brother finalizing a celebration already unraveling at the seams. The silence between us was complete now, not heavy, not cruel, just earned. Saturday morning came clear and bright, the kind of day made for weddings. The air was still soft with the smell of roasted beans and something faintly electric, like the pause before a storm. I sat by the window watching Portland's quiet streets stretch awake. My phone began to vibrate against the table. Once, then again, then again. The first message flashed from Ethan. "The caterer isn't here." Before I could even sip my coffee, another followed. "The florist canceled." A third message blinked. "Where's the band?" I didn't answer. The screen kept lighting up, a relentless rhythm of confusion and panic. Calls started coming through, one after another, his name glowing in white letters. I let them ring. The house felt peaceful in contrast to the chaos I imagined unfolding somewhere across town. When I finally picked up, his voice was sharp, almost trembling. "Adele, what did you do? There's no food, no music, no flowers. Everyone's asking questions." I took a slow breath, stirring the coffee that had gone cold. "Just a small gift, Ethan," I said quietly. "Don't make a big deal out of it." There was silence on the other end, thick and uneven. "You can't be serious," he said finally. This is insane." His words stumbled, heavy with disbelief. "I'm perfectly serious," I replied. "You wanted peace. You've got it." Then I ended the call. The rain began an hour later, soft at first, then steady. I left the window open just enough to hear it tapping against the ledge. The sound filled the room with an odd calm, washing away whatever remnants of guilt had tried to settle in. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I just felt done. My phone kept buzzing on the counter screen, flashing with missed calls. Mom, then Dad, then Ethan again. I turned it face down and listened to the rain until the noise faded into background static. Across town, the wedding must have been unraveling. I could imagine the empty reception hall, the guests standing uncertainly in their formal clothes, the band never arriving, the tables bare except for folded napkins and unlit candles. Claire, the bride, was probably crying. She had once texted me about centerpiece colors, her messages filled with cheerful exclamation marks. I could almost see her now, mascara smudged, whispering to someone in disbelief. She wouldn't do this right. Linda would be furious. She'd move through the venue like a storm wrapped in silk, demanding answers that no one could give. Dad Robert would stand beside her in silence, jaw-tight eyes darting anywhere but hers. He had always preferred avoidance to confrontation. By early afternoon, the sun disappeared behind gray clouds. The rain turned heavier, steady enough to blur the city outside my window. I watched a single drop crawl down the glass, splitting into two smaller trails before disappearing at the edge. It reminded me of something my friend Marin had said: silence is sometimes the loudest protest. I took another sip of my cold coffee and leaned back. Somewhere in that chaos, they would finally realize what I had done, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Every invoice they ignored, every effort they took for granted had led to this moment. The absence they had demanded was finally tangible. The phone rang one last time before going quiet. I let it. The silence that followed was the purest sound I had ever heard. Outside, Portland's rain kept falling in silver sheets. I stayed by the window until dusk, letting the cool air fill the room. My hands rested around the empty cup, warm only from memory. The wedding was happening somewhere without food, without flowers, without me. And for the first time in years, that felt exactly right. A knock came at my door early that morning. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. Linda stood in front of me, her face pale with exhaustion, and Robert was beside her, his expression unreadable. Neither spoke at first. The air between us felt heavy, stretched thin by everything left unsaid. Linda stepped inside without waiting to be invited. Robert followed her slower, keeping a careful distance as if proximity might ignite something neither of them was ready to face. I closed the door behind them and stayed near it. She turned toward me, her voice tight. "Why would you humiliate your brother like that?" I met her eyes. I didn't humiliate anyone. I just stopped paying for a show I wasn't invited to. Her mouth tightened. A show that was his wedding. You made a mockery of your own family. I didn't make a mockery of anything, I said calmly. I simply withdrew my name from the bill you expected me to sign without question. Robert's voice came low. Adele, your brother was devastated. You could have told us what you were planning. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, I said. You all made your choices. I just made mine. Linda shook her head, disbelief coloring every word. You've always been like this, so independent, so cold. We tried to include you. You didn't try, I said softly. You excluded me, then wanted my money to make it easier to pretend everything was fine. Her hands clenched at her sides. You think this is about money? It was never about anything else, I replied. When I stopped paying, the truth finally showed. Robert shifted his weight, rubbing his temples as if searching for balance in a conversation that refused to stay still. This isn't helping, he murmured. We just want to understand. There's nothing to understand, I said. You wanted peace. Remember, no drama, no interruptions. I respected that. Linda's voice cracked. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. No, I said. You embarrassed yourselves when you treated me like a problem that needed to be managed. Her eyes filled with tears, but anger kept them from falling. Do you even care what this has done to your brother? I cared enough to stop pretending, I said. That's more honesty than anyone else in this family has managed in years. Robert looked up, eyes tired. We all made mistakes. But this was cruel. It wasn't cruel, I said. It was quiet. That's the difference. The silence that followed stretched across the room like a curtain. Linda's breathing grew uneven. She took a step toward me, then stopped. I don't recognize you anymore. I haven't changed, I said. You just never saw me without the parts you needed. She turned away, pressing a hand to her forehead. You think you're proving something, but all you've done is divide us. The division was already there, I answered. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. Robert looked at her, then at me. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Maybe we should go. Linda exhaled shakily. You've destroyed your relationship with this family. I didn't flinch. No. I just stopped financing it. She stared at me for a long moment, as if searching for the daughter she thought she could reason with, the one who used to say yes even when she wanted to scream no. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. You'll regret this one day. Maybe, I said. But not today. She turned to leave. Robert hesitated, then followed. Neither of them looked back. I stood by the door until their footsteps faded down the hall. Then I locked it. For a moment, I listened to the faint echo of the latch clicking into place. The quiet filled the apartment like a living thing, familiar and strangely comforting. I walked to the table where yesterday's invitation still lay. My hand brushed over it, tracing the embossed letters that no longer meant anything. That's the peace you wanted, I whispered. Then, after a pause, I added, and that's the silence you earned. The words felt steady, not bitter. They hung in the air like the closing of a book I no longer needed to reopen. 3 months later, Portland felt quieter. I had moved to Seattle, trading the familiar gray skyline for one that held no memories. The transfer came through faster than I expected, and I took it without hesitation. A new office, a smaller apartment, mornings that started with the sound of fairies instead of family messages I no longer read. There was peace in routine, in making coffee for one, in knowing that silence had finally settled where chaos used to live. One afternoon, an email arrived from Ethan. The subject line was just his name. I opened it out of habit, not curiosity. His words were short. I should have stopped them. I read it twice, maybe 3 times, then closed the laptop without replying. Some apologies are too late, not because they lack sincerity, but because the damage has already turned into distance. A few days later, Marin texted me, "Do you feel lighter?" I stared at the screen for a while before typing back, like I finally exhaled. She replied with a single heart emoji, then nothing else. We both knew there was nothing more to say. News traveled fast even when I wasn't looking for it. Claire lost her position at the PR firm after a client pulled out, citing the wedding scandal. Ethan tried to defend her, but reputation moves faster than reason. Linda was quietly removed from the church fundraising committee after questions arose about misuse of funds. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew why. The same hands that once moved money so easily had finally been noticed. When I heard it all, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt a strange stillness, like watching a storm from a distance after surviving it. I opened my journal that evening and wrote one line that had been echoing in my head. Sometimes peace looks like distance. Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and let the quiet remain. Sometimes peace isn't found in forgiveness, but in distance. You can love your family and still choose yourself when they stop respecting you. Letting go doesn't mean hatred. It means honoring your limits. Silence isn't revenge, it's clarity. The older I get, the more I understand that peace isn't always warm or mutual. Sometimes it's simply the decision to stop standing in the fire and start breathing again. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If you've ever had to walk away from family to protect your peace, I see you. Share your story or your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. Maybe your version of peace looks different, maybe it doesn't. Either way, I'd love to know, what does peace mean to you?